Hey everyone, I am Erin Bailey, and if you're watching this, it's probably because you're thinking about writing your college essay or maybe dreading it. So if that's you, you have come to the right place because today I'm going to walk through how to brainstorm an essay topic that's actually yours. Not something generic that admissions officers have seen a million times, but something real that only you can write. This is going to take about 20 minutes, and by the end, you're going to have clarity and you're going to know the steps you need to move forward. So if you haven't yet downloaded your fillable workbook from the webpage, please pause the video now and take a moment to do that so you are all set and ready to go. Okay, let's do this. So let's start first by asking, how are you feeling about starting the personal statement? So be honest, right? You might feel excited, you might feel overwhelmed, or maybe even totally lost. Here are some of the things I hear from students all the time. They say, I don't know what to write about. That's a common one. I don't know where to start. I don't know what colleges are looking for. I don't know how to make my essay stand out. And my personal favorite is, I don't know how to be creative. I've never actually found that one to be true in all of the students that I've worked with. If this sounds like you, I want you to know that that is totally normal. Most students feel this way, but the difference is after today, you won't. Okay, so here's what's gonna happen in the next 20 minutes. You're going to first understand what a personal statement is and why it matters so much to your application. Second, you're going to learn the 4 principles of choosing an essay topic that works. And third, and this is the really, really valuable part that I hope you will fully participate in, is that you're gonna get some real strategies for brainstorming ideas that are actually interesting. So by the time we're done, you're going to have a clear roadmap and you're going to know exactly what direction to head, and you're probably maybe even gonna be a little excited about writing this. Sound good? All right, so let's talk about why this even matters. So I'm spending this time teaching you about essays because your personal statement is your 650 word chance to show the admission committee who you are beyond your grades and test scores. That's it, 650 words. It's like 1 page and like this much. So that's all of the space you get to give them a little slice of your life. Give them a moment, a realization that demonstrates your unique personality and your unique perspective that you'll be bringing to campus. These schools build their communities really intentionally. And so if they don't feel like they know you, after they read your essay, you're probably not going to get in. And yes, these are real human beings who read it and actually want to get to know you. But here's the thing, right? Admissions officers only spend about 4 to 6 minutes reading an application. That's it, right? So your essay really has to pop off the page. It has to be incredibly readable, incredibly engaging, and compelling to keep them interested. So here's an example. I had a student, Samir, whose dream school was to transfer to UT Austin, but his GPA was like a full point below the average transfer rate, and he had no test scores. But he wrote some essays that were really personal to him, very unique, and really captured like who he was at his core. And guess what? Right now, he is studying economics at UT Austin, right? So this just goes to show the power of your essay. It can completely change your outcome. I like to say, right, your stats get you considered, but your story gets you in. At the most selective colleges, everybody has those high scores. So it's your essay that is going to differentiate you. Okay, so here's the framework. There are 4 principles of a great college essay topic, and I really want you to pay attention here because this is going to not only guide choosing your essay topic, but also really guide how you approach the essay in general. So the first principle is a great essay topic tells a story that is unique to you. Ask yourself the question, could somebody else have written this story? And if the answer is yes, not the right essay topic. So I don't like to say that there are any essay topics that are off limits, because I do really think a unique perspective and excellent writing craft can really make any topic really pop, can make it really compelling. However, if you are a little insecure about your craft, or maybe a little inexperienced in personal narrative writing, or how to make writing that really stands out or engages the reader, then I would avoid these topics because they are really common. So, mission trips, sports competitions, musical or theatrical performances, stuff that already appears on your resume, overcoming a bad grade, breakups, or cliche immigration stories, right? These are a dime a dozen. And unless you really, tell it from a perspective that is completely unique, it's going to get lost in the shuffle. So here's a little graph to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So on our x-axis, we have writing craft, right? So starting from, not very good all the way to Hemingway quality prose. And then we have our uncommon topics. So on our y-axis, so super common all the way to the most unusual, weird thing anyone has ever heard. When you have both of those at that intersection, you have an uncommon topic and you have killer writing craft, that's where we get those A+ standout once in a lifetime essays. If you have one of those, you're probably going to end in like a B or maybe a C+ category. And then if you have a super common topic and your writing craft is just not up to snuff, then you're going to end up in the D or F category, and probably you're going to end up in the reject pile. Right? So make sure that if you know that your writing craft is closer, right, to maybe not as developed, then choose an uncommon topic, because it really puts you at an advantage. So here's an example of how to tell a story that is really unique to you. So I was working with a student named Mahika who was really interested in studying computer science, very passionate about it. But also a big part of her identity that I learned about over the weeks that we worked together was her incredible dedication, and how much of her identity was defined by her culture. All of these beautiful, rich Indian traditions that she had learned from her family who had immigrated from India. And one thing she learned from her grandmother was the art of Rangoli. For those of you who don't know, Rangoli is creating designs in vibrantly colored sand. And this is something that is really difficult, and it has all of these layers of meaning, right? Because it is made of sand, so it is impermanent. It's beautiful, just like life. And she learned so many skills from this art form. She learned patience. She learned tradition. She learned attention to detail. She learned pattern and symmetry. And she was able to tie all of these skills she learned from this cultural tradition to computer science. And at the end of our process, she said, the specific questions you asked, I never would have thought about if I had worked alone. What I really liked was how we channeled the whole story around Rangoli design and associated that with computer programs. It was more multi-layered than anything I would have done on my own. You really pushed me to bring out what I wanted to write, right? So this is a perspective on computer science that is new, right? I would be very surprised if a admissions officer had made those connections before, and it was so her, right? This was an absolutely essential part of who she was. And it worked. She got into University of Maryland in the honors program. So great example. So the second principle is you as the hero of your own journey. Okay, so this means that in your essay, admissions officers want to see how you think. They want to see how you react to situations. Okay, so I have seen students fall into the trap of talking about a mentor or a hero or somebody who has inspired them. It might be a parent or a family member. It could be, a historical figure. And the essay ends up more being about that person than the student. That is a mistake. Okay, so I want to give you an example. So I worked with a student, Isabella, who was interested in going to one of the most competitive early medical pathways in the country at Tufts. And I think what really stood out about her essay was, at the beginning of our work together, I asked her, "Have you faced any challenges?" And she had a hard time thinking of anything. And then she said, "Well, I've always really struggled with eczema my whole life." And initially, I was like, "Well, I don't think we can write an essay about itchy skin." But the more she talked about it, the more I realized like she was the hero of this story. And it really showed the way that she thought, because what she did was fascinating. She really approached the problem from her own unique scientific thinking mind, right? The way she thought about solving this problem was from the mindset of a doctor. So she experimented in a very scientific method minded. She tried different creams, she changed her diet, she monitored her stress levels, like all of these different factors, weather, right? So she recorded all of this until she was able to find out how to control her eczema on her own. And it really showed the way that she thought about the scientific method and about medicine in general. And in the end, she got in, right? Because she was the hero of her own story. She had a problem and she used her thinking, right, and her skills in order to solve it. And she ended up at Tufts in this amazing medical program. All right, third principle. Make sure if you are writing about challenges that they are compelling. Okay, and compelling doesn't have to mean big. It does not have to be a life and death situation. It does not have to be a trauma. It does not have to be moving across the country, right? It can be a small moment, but it needs to be compelling, right? It needs to be an actual real moment of change. Okay, so writing about the time you got a C plus on your assignment isn't really like that life changing. You know what I mean? It doesn't change the way you see yourself. It doesn't change the way that you see the world, right? It's just not compelling enough. It has to be something that causes you to change or to understand something about yourself or the world in a new way. And principle number 4, and this one is my absolute favorite. It needs to be something that you are excited and curious to explore. You cannot fake the energy and enthusiasm that comes from genuine curiosity. So I think a really great example of this is I worked with a student named Amanda. And Amanda was a bit of a perfectionist. She was a very strong student. She was used to being the one who had it all together. And part of her identity was her Japanese heritage. And she was able to weave together this whole essay, right, that explored this idea of kintsugi. Okay, so kintsugi is pottery. It's a Japanese form of pottery where they smash the bowl and then they glue it back together with gold lacquer, right? And it's very symbolic, right? And it has to do with how like our life experiences make us more beautiful, more unique, and that like our cracks or our scars are beauty. And so Amanda used this metaphor to really explore herself in a way that she never had before. She thought about, some of her weaknesses, some of her scars, some of the parts of herself that she hadn't really explored before, and really thought about like how they had changed her, how they had shaped her and made her more beautiful in some ways. And she ended up getting admitted to UCSD. And this was not just a great college essay, right? This was just a great exploration of who she was and like really digging into some of the pieces of herself that she had not had the courage to dig into before, right? And that sort of self-discovery, like taking the reader on that journey with you of asking yourself those hard questions and getting uncomfortable, in your own story is so powerful. Like, I want to be on that journey with you. All right, so here are the 4 principles of choosing a topic. Must be a story that is unique to you. Are you the only one who could write this essay? You must be the hero of your own story. It must be centered on you, your actions, your problem solving, your thinking. Make sure that any challenges you write about are compelling, right? They have changed you or the way you think about yourself or the world. And 4, it must be something that you are curious and excited to explore. So I just want you to think to yourself right now, which of these principles do you find most helpful? All right, so now we're going to shift a little bit into finding the insights in your essay. You must demonstrate that you are learning lessons from your experiences. Self-reflection is key. Every single college essay must have an element of self-reflection, preferably in each paragraph. One thing I do when I'm working with students is in those like meaty body paragraphs, and especially when we get to the conclusion, I am looking for a life lesson, an insight in every single paragraph, right? I go through with my yellow highlighter and I am looking for those takeaways. All right, so I'm going to give you 3 ninja moves for finding those lessons, finding those insights. Okay, so the first one is start with what you want to do in the future and work backwards, right? Obviously, if you have no idea what you want to do, not the most helpful thing, but a lot of students do have an idea of like their future career. So if that's you, this is a really helpful one. So what that looks like is this. This is a real example from a student I worked with who wanted to be an anthropologist. What we do is we look at the values required to be that particular thing, right? So an anthropologist needs curiosity, an anthropologist needs respect, an anthropologist needs like work ethic, right? So we think about what are those values that an anthropologist needs to have. How did you learn those values, right? So specific events or life experiences. And then what was the insight you gained from that experience, right? And that can really pull out a lot of great insights to add to your essay, right? So for example, if you want to be an anthropologist and you know that anthropologists must be curious, right? So then you think, well, what is a time or maybe many times or experiences I've had where I was curious in the way that an anthropologist is curious, right? So maybe you were deciphering graffiti on your locker and thinking about who was that kid who wrote that? Why did that kid write that? And then what insight have you gained from that, right? So maybe the insight you've gained is humans have this deep desire to be remembered, right? So work backwards from what you want to do in the future, and that can really help pull out some unusual insights. The second ninja move is list out the expected insights and then do the opposite. So I have a great example of this. There was a student I worked with, Samir, I think I mentioned him before, who wrote about his grandfather, and his grandfather he wrote about caring for his grandfather who had dementia, and the expected insight is when family needs help, we need to step up, we need to be strong for those around us, right? And instead he did the opposite, right? And he wrote about how when his grandfather couldn't remember who he was, he okay, so now you know the 4 principles, and that is great. But I guess the question now is, how do we find the stories? How do we find the experiences? How do we brainstorm the insights and the lessons that are absolutely important to communicate to an admissions officer? This is really, really important, okay? Self-reflection is key, okay? Admissions officers want to know how you think and they want to see maturity. And part of maturity is actually thinking about yourself in order to grow. Okay, so when I'm working with students, I actually specifically look for insights in every paragraph, right? I take my yellow highlighter and I make sure that every single paragraph has at least one takeaway, a self reflection, an insight, an observation about the world that is nuanced and complex, right? You need to show that level of thinking. Okay, so I'm going to share with you 3 ninja moves, right? I call them ninja moves because I don't know. I feel like they're a little sneaky and they're a little bit fun and they really get you where you need to go. Okay. They're powerful. All right. So the first ninja move is start with what you want to do in the future and work backwards. This is great if you have a strong passion that you're working towards. So I want you to imagine, like, what is it that you see yourself doing in 5 or 10 years? And then you think backwards from there. So here's an example from a student I worked with who was interested in becoming an anthropologist. Okay, so you have the thing you want to do in the future, and then you brainstorm what are the values required in order to do that thing, right? So maybe to be an anthropologist, you need to be curious, you need to be respectful, you need to be detail oriented. And then you think, how did I learn that value? What are the experiences that taught me the values that got me interested in this particular field in the first place? Right. So maybe if you've identified that curiosity is essential to being an anthropologist, maybe you realized you were interested in human history when you were deciphering the graffiti on your locker and you were thinking about this kid from the 90s and why he wrote his name on there and what he was thinking and who was Amanda and why was he in love with her. And you really epitomize that curiosity. It's a small moment, right? But maybe it was compelling to you. It was a moment you realized how interested you are in people from the past, right? And then the next step is to think about what is the insight you gained, right, from that experience, right? So maybe if you were deciphering the graffiti on your locker, right, you realize that humans have a deep desire to be remembered, right? That is such a human thing, right? We all want to have legacy. We all want to be remembered. And I think that's an important thing for an anthropologist to realize as well, right? And that is kind of deep thinking, right? Not a lot of 16 or 17-year-olds really get there. And so it shows a level of complexity and nuance and maturity that's really going to stand out in your essay, right? So that's ninja move number 1. Think about what you want to do in the future and work backwards from there. All right, next, ninja move number 2. You're going to list out the expected insights and then do the opposite. Okay, so let's say, for example, that you are writing about, a time that you didn't work hard enough. Let's say, for example, I don't know, not a great example because it's a super common topic, but let's say, for example, you were writing about a music recital and you didn't practice enough. And when you got to the music recital, you really embarrassed yourself and you messed up, right? The expected insight is you need to work hard in order to find success. You need to prepare ahead of time in order to get what you want. That's expected, right? Instead, do the opposite. Maybe instead, the insight is that don't invest yourself in things you don't want to do, right? Maybe your insight is if I had been interested in music in the first place, right, I would have practiced because it would have been my passion. And, I'm from now on, I'm only investing in things that I'm truly passionate about, right? That is unexpected, right? That is the opposite of what I'm expecting you to say. And that makes it interesting. All right, finally, ninja move number 3, admit you were wrong. I love this one because vulnerability is an absolute essential element to every single personal statement. And it's something that is really scary for a lot of students to do because it's scary to be vulnerable. Human beings, when you make yourself vulnerable, you open yourself to rejection or getting hurt. But in the case of a personal statement, it is absolutely essential. When we open ourselves to another human being, right, we become likable, right? We become relatable. We become human. And you must do that in your essay. If you want to stand out, you must have a dose of vulnerability. So here's an example. A student I worked with, Samir, he wrote about taking care of his grandfather with dementia, right? This story was really about him. It was very unique. And one thing that he realized he did that was wrong, right, was as he was taking care of his grandfather, there was a moment when his grandfather did not recognize him. And, Samir was crushed, he was hurt, and he was really scared. And he avoided his grandfather for several weeks, right? Not only is that something that we don't expect a student to write in his essay, right? But it is incredibly vulnerable. It is so human, right? And so relatable, and also not our proudest moment, right? And there is something so just brave and beautiful about being able to admit that. And it's not what we expect, right? We expect the story of the noble student who steps up and saves the day, right? And in this case, the student was brave enough to admit that they had been wrong, admit that they had made a mistake. And he is now going to be studying economics at UT Austin. All right. So I want you to think about which strategy will you use to create unexpected insights. The insights must be unexpected. Please do not pepper your essay with cliches. Do not tell me how you learned not to judge a book by its cover. Do not tell me how you learned hard work pays off. Don't do it. Okay? You must create nuance, complex, unexpected insights if you're going to stand out. Okay, so here's what I want you to do right now. Think about the 4 principles that we just went through, and I want you to brainstorm 3 or 4 potential essay topics. They don't have to be perfect, and they don't even have to be fully formed. Just start throwing some ideas out. Write them down in your workbook, and then I want you to check them against the 4 principles that we just discussed. Does it tell a story that is uniquely yours? Is it specific? Is it honest? Is it vulnerable? Is it something that only you could write? The topic that hits all 4 of those, that's your topic. Also, a parent once asked me, they said, how do you know when a student has hit on the right topic? And I said, it's easy because their face lights up. You can literally see it. And that energy, it pops off the page, and admissions officers feel it. So find the topic that lights you up. So I want you to think about this though, right? The personal statement is the first step. The students who really stand out are the ones that have a cohesive narrative across their entire application, a thread that ties everything together, every activity, every recommendation, every supplement, they're all pointing in the same direction. That's the work that really moves the needle. And if you're sitting there thinking then like, okay, well, what is my student's narrative? What's the thread that connects everything? That's exactly the conversation that I want to have with you. Book a free consultation call at the link below, and we'll take a look at where your student is right now, what their story could possibly be, and whether working together makes sense. There's no pressure, just a conversation. It has been wonderful having you in this lesson, and I hope to see you there.